Are there? I think some of my videos are confusing people. I say people. I've only got 36 subscribers. So, and in relation to the number of videos I I have done, this is, I suppose, a bit of a academic point about who is confused and who isn't. But perhaps some people might be confused later on. And it's this question of hermeticism, magic, in relation to transcendentalism and Gnosticism. So I thought I'd put it in a sort of form of a dialogue, really, because true it is that I suppose I've dissed magic quite a bit, really, despite having practiced magic, I suppose, for 4 decades or perhaps longer than that. I've associated magic with superstition, with hypnosis, autosuggestion, belief paradigms, traditions of belief, which have more to do with social cohesion than anything else. And basically, that magic is unscientific and basically something to be rejected. Even though even scientists or psychologists might suggest that from the point of view of meaningfulness and deep psychology, magic might have its uses, and alchemy might have its uses, but for everything else, really, it's not really that useful or to be taken that seriously, really. I was thinking today about a magical incident that I had recently when I saw my psychologist's face, half of which was just a blank, was just black. I mean, on the left-hand side of her face was all black, and the right-hand side was her face. And this was something, an image that I received really very strongly, like as if it was really, really there or really, really real. And believe me, I sort of have trained myself to recognize the difference between hallucination, which is normally caused by acute stress, and magical images, which come into your mind as a result of relaxation. In fact, the opposite of stress. So you can't have it both ways, can you? You can't say, all these things are seen because you're stressed and are not schizophrenic. So we can rule that out. So when you rule out schizophrenia and you rule out acute stress and you rule out, I was feeling quite happy and cheerful and relaxed at the time. But I still saw her face, half of which was missing. And you could say that, what does that mean in psychological terms and alchemical terms and Jungian terms and all that? But to me, the question you should be asking of what does that image mean in relation to me as a person, and my relationship to the divine, and the relationship of humanity to the divine. And that would seem to me that image would be sort of giving me a signpost to the state of play of humanity in relation to the divine, and to myself in relation to the divine. So half her face missing, the left-hand side of her face missing. You can take from that what you will. And I would just record that data, and it would be up to you, the person looking at it, watching this video, to interpret it in your own way. I'm just the sort of spiritual journalist, as it were. But I also look for meaning for myself as well, privately, which I'm obviously not going to share with you necessarily. Anyway, so that was sort of... But I generally don't like magic, don't trust it, very suspicious of it, let us say. So that's on that side, which is sort of negative against magic. But you could reply, and indeed people like Mr. Green from Australia would reply as a chaos magician. He would reply 2 things. No, there's 2 things here. One is that there really is independent verification of a lot of things that are claimed to be magical. Okay, and I know magic is a terrible word because Obviously, it's associated with conjuring and hypnosis and mass hypnosis and conformance psychology. But magic is a sort of loaded word, but it's also a word that grabs your attention, right? Because you think of Harry Potter and all that. So anyway, but magic has been independently verified. And the Kabbalah, in fact, the whole system of magic and mysticism was built up on independent verification, which, of course, is one of the cornerstones of empiricism, is it not? And the other thing is that magic seems to also conform to a quantum mechanics model as well. And there's visualizations where you can go into the quantum, you can visualize yourself going down to the quantum level, and you'll see the quantum level all wavy, and irritated and disrupted. And then with your mind, you smooth out the quantum ocean, as it were. And very often this has a fantastically huge placebo effect on your body. Or is it a placebo effect, or is it something which is happening on the quantum level, which your mind has actually created? Your heightened mind, your augmented mind, as it were. So is not magic, in fact, both scientific and based on quantum theory, quantum mechanics, and therefore it's not gobbledygook, it's not wishful thinking, it's not belief, it's not tradition, it's not conformance. It really is there. Okay. So I would argue, well, if so, then we can perhaps recategorize magic, the magic eye and the magic senses, and put them into the category of, let us say, microscope, or atomic microscope. In other words, we are attuning our minds, we're tuning our five senses, in fact, or creating another sense altogether, that is used to detect changes in nature, layers of nature, if you like, that otherwise could not be detected, or detected very roughly, or detected and all mixed up with psychology and stress and conformance and belief and wishful thinking and all that. But here we have, if a magical system is applied rigorously enough, then here we have another telescope, another microscope. I keep saying telescope, another microscope. And we have another way of detecting behaviors in nature, as I say, that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. And this is all magic really is. Okay, so this is enough of a revelation, I suppose. But then I counter with this by saying, well, be that as it may, even if we have created a new detection device called magical training, or the magical eye, or another sense altogether, apart from our five senses, we have a sixth sense. Even if we have created that, as my video on the Magick Hamster points out, we're still focusing on the realms of the Demiurge. We're still focusing on everything that is connected to the material, albeit subtly. And we're no sort of further forward. We're still trapped in this prison. It's just that we can see more detail of it, let us say, or we have access to other chambers within the dungeon, but we're still in the dungeon. And what we really need, in other words, it's not being transcendental enough, and what we really need is to get out of this prison altogether. And it's so magic is still not quite there yet. It's still not quite transcendental enough. So then I suppose you could counter that by saying, okay, maybe so, but maybe we can use magic, we can use the development of our sixth sense to become more aware of the voice of the silence, to become more aware of the data stream from the transcendental sources that exist, that are impinging on the lower worlds, as it were. So you have higher worlds and you have lower worlds, and the sort of where they actually sort of join or overlap, as it were. We can become, through magical training, more aware of the overlapping areas between the realms of the Demiurge and the Transcendental realm, okay, between oneness and allness, if you like. And that's very important because, for example, when you think that Saul had to be blinded in order for him to be aware of the Christ consciousness, he had to be blinded in order for Christ to get his attention, to put it rather crudely. Then obviously, if we do the magical training, then we won't have to have that happen to us. We won't need such dramatic miracles happening to us in order for us to become aware of the voice of the silence and prepare. So, in a sense, magic is really, preparing the lamps. We have the maidens with their lamps, and we need we need to keep our lamps clean. We need to keep ourselves purified. We need to keep ourselves attuned to the voice of the silence, so that it can come through the static of our monkey consciousness, monkey minds, in order to have some impact on us. And so basically we're just saving ourselves a lot of trouble, because if the Holy Spirit has to get our attention, it will get our attention by any means possible, which sounds a little bit ruthless on its part, but after all, Saul did get his vision back again, and he became Paul. He was reborn, so it was only a temporary discomfort, a temporary state of cataclysm for the individual. So it was perhaps a bit ruthless, but perhaps not ruthless in the grand scheme of things, if you know what I mean. But we don't have to go that far. We don't have to have that drama happen to us if we keep our magical detection systems as pure as possible and as tuned in as possible. So we're basically prepared to receive the data stream from a transcendental source, from the transcendental source, moreover. So then it's sort of what I've done here. So basically, we've recategorized magic with a K as pertaining to something that is that basically is a means to an end, and that end is transcendental for sure. And the means is by creating a sixth sense in us, so that we might be able to better understand the workings of the divine, for one, and understand the screeching of brakes on the other, and that we understand meanings, but we also get the raw information, with less drama than poor old Saul did on the way to Damascus. So that's basically it's a kind of an argument I've set up here, where I've come to the conclusion that perhaps certain magics are useful, and indeed, if you get yourself a copy of Magick by Aleister Crowley, and go to the first part of that, and you follow some of the training that he suggests in order for you to develop this sixth sense, this magical eye, then that's very good. But what actually is needed is for somebody to rewrite that part of magic, because a lot of it is gobbledygook, a lot of it is Crowley pulling a leg, a lot of it is Crowley on heroin or hash or cocaine, full of his own importance. And someone needs to rewrite it because the English is very antiquated, and some of the ideas are very old-fashioned, and it needs a modern interpretation. It needs a person to rewrite the whole thing in language that the average person in the street in the USA or in Europe could actually understand, that would make sense to them. And okay, you could say, well, it needs dumbing down. Well, it is very simple. The techniques are simple, but they have to be explained very, very simplistically in order for people to get them, in order for people to be bothered to do the magical training. Because if they don't understand any of the English, They don't understand Crowley's English humour. They don't understand the old-fashioned approach that Crowley has to training methods. I mean, I'm not saying that Crowley is right when he says, we're all very lazy, because we are very lazy, and I'm a particularly lazy person. And in a sense, we do all need a kick up the bum. But there's smart ways of kicking yourself up the bum. Do you know what I mean? There's smart ways of making people do the work without sort of beating them with a beating them with a screwdriver in order to make them work, or a whip or something. You don't have to whip yourself. You can pace yourself. You can work smart, but you can work very hard. And if you work very hard, you will detect a magical eye. You will detect a sixth sense that will prepare you to receive data stream from the transcendental source, and will also focus your magical eye on the transcendental and not on all the deceiving layers of the occult world, so-called, that are just part of the Demiurge's unreality. So indeed, you can use magic to connect yourself to the underlying reality of all this, which of course is unreal for a start, and you can actually propel yourself onto the right track, as it were, the spiritual path that will take you from here, where the spirit is imprisoned, or the soul is imprisoned, to the source of the source, which is utterly transcendental to what we see here around us with our five material senses. So I suppose and considering that magic is also independently verifiable and seems to sort of independently verifiable. Then we have good reason to suppose that we're not actually talking about belief, conformity, tradition, gobbledygook, wishful thinking, some kind of hippy dippy sort of cultural nonsense. We are talking about something which really, really is out there, okay, to be detected. But the question is, are you going to be disciplined enough to train your mind to detect what is definitely out there? Or are you going to just sort of wallow in gobbledygook, as it were? Because there is a lot of gobbledygook, and there is a lot of magic which is wrongly focused, as it were. So you're going to have to be able to discern very carefully the gobbledygook from the actual, and from the poorly focused or wrongly focused. So you're going to have to discern between three different elements, and they're all mixed up together in this world as well. So it's quite a challenge for you, which is why you do need to do the magical training, without a doubt, so that you can transcend your ego for one thing, and you can transcend the snares of the demiurge for another, and actually tune in to the truth, to the actual, rather than what we would like things to be, to what they actually are. What they actually are is beyond, is astonishing. I mean, really astonishing, and you will be astonished. Just as people were astonished, when they discovered electricity, no doubt, or astonished when they discovered, black holes. You will be astonished to discover the things that actually exist from the transcendental source, which at the moment are totally beyond your conception and totally beyond your experience. But by the use of transcendental magic, you will be able to experience these things, and to take your consciousness as it's sort of configured now, and take that consciousness with you across the Rainbow Bridge, to actually experience the transcendental realm as you experience this realm. That's the clever thing about it. But your soul will be free, instead of imprisoned as it is now.